Want to make money in crypto? This is Token Metrics. Token Metrics helps crypto investors build profitable portfolios using artificial intelligence-based crypto indices, trading indicators, rankings, and price predictions for more than 6,000 crypto assets. Affiliate link in the description below.
When you launch a currency or a blockchain, you have the ability to use that event as a crowdfunding process, and it doesn't really have to be for a blockchain project. You could actually conceivably use the model for, a payment method, or whether or not you actually want, like, a vote for whether or not people want a system to launch, even, because basically there's a model during the launch. So the launches and the participation all happens on chain as part of the protocol. There's no person selling any coins, there's no person handling any conversions, it's all just decentralized and automated on the blockchain. And you can, as I said before, you can set a minimum participation. And if your minimum isn't met, then your currency will not launch, and everybody who tried to participate would get refunded at the launch time. With a blockchain, when you start a blockchain, you have the ability to start both the blockchain and another currency, which is its bridge liquidity pool, which can convert fees when you're sending back. That's another thing nobody else does, but it solves the cross-chain issues. It's the cross-chain fee problem. I think I tweeted about that, and nobody talks about it because nobody actually has a solution, but we've already solved it, and it's part of our protocol. And so, when you send cross-chain, you send using the fees of the chain you're sending from, and every cross-chain connection can have a liquidity pool that is efficient enough to actually convert these micro amounts of fees from one blockchain's currency to the other, so that you pay in your fee, they receive in their fee. And so when you're launching a PBAS chain, you have the option of launching two currencies, both the PBAS chain in its native currency and the pool currency, or the liquidity pool, that lives kind of at L0 between the two. It's used for all the cross-chain conversions, but it's also a liquidity pool that can be used for any kind of conversion. So it's an actual, independent liquidity pool currency of its own. And you can launch it in a way so that so both of those launches, the PBAS chain and its liquidity pool, can have minimum participation. You don't have to allow participation in either of them, but you can also allow participation in both of them, and you can set a minimum. And if you don't meet the minimum in both of them, neither of them will launch, and everyone will get refunded for both of them. So a little bit of a kind of coordinated launch capability, because that matters when you're launching a PBAS chain and you want to have a liquidity pool, and there are all sorts of things that you can use that for. And this gives you the capability of, allowing the same kind of crowdfunding Kickstarter-like model for an actual PBAS chain and its liquidity pool. As I mentioned before, I think that we were talking about this before we turned on the recording, a currency launch can include a pre-launch discount, which means that the on-chain price of that currency will be higher by that discount than the price that people who participate in the pre-launch pay. You can also take funding from a launch through pre-launch carve-outs, or fund, even payment for just activities that were necessary to do the launch. The pre-launch carve-outs come out of the currencies that are being contributed, not out of the final currency, the new currency. So that means if you got a contribution that is allowed in Verus and in, say, USDC or Ethereum, a pre-launch carve-out of 5% would give you 5% of the Verus proceeds, 5% of the Ethereum proceeds, and 5% of the USDC proceeds. Again, all of this is transparent, and everybody can see that you're taking a pre-launch carve-out when they look at your currency definition. Pre-allocations are similar. The pre-allocation is emitted And both the pre-launch carve-out and the pre-allocations, which can go to identities, they can go to time-locked identities to ensure that the identities will not be able to access their pre-allocations until a certain amount of time. But both of these, so the pre-launch discount changes the pre-launch price to be lower than the post-launch price. And it does that by using some kind of, I would say, advanced math that takes into account the reserve ratio of the currency, and it increases the reserve ratio by the pre-launch discount percentage. Pre-launch carve-outs work the same way, so they are price neutral, meaning if you take a pre-launch carve-out, it won't affect the price that people pay pre-launch, and it won't affect the price of the currency post-launch. What it will do is the more you take in pre-launch carve-outs and the more you take in pre-allocations, the lower the final reserve ratio of the currency will be when it launches. So it means that we'll see what that means. So this is just a little bit about how fractional currencies and automated liquidity pools work. And what I'm going to do in this is I've simplified the discussion a lot, and I'm focusing on just a single currency scenario. But you can actually have any number. Well, we're probably going to have a limit of like 10 currencies in a basket by the time we get to mainnet, but there isn't a real limit. It's more just practical use matter. In this case, you're not dealing with 100% currency. 100% backed currency will be a pegged currency. It will always have the same direct relationship in price between the reserve and the actual fractional currency. So you could have $1 and you could have a currency that was 10 of those currencies for every dollar, so it's worth a dime. But that price will never change if the backing is 100%. It doesn't have to be 1-to-1, so it doesn't have to be one of currency A is equivalent to $1, but the ratio, the price relationship will never change on 100% backed currency. On a 50% backed currency, so say it's backed by 50% VRSC, if you convert from VRSC to the currency, the price will go up in VRSC. If you convert from the currency to VRSC, the price will go down. If you have multiple currencies in a basket, it works similarly, but the relationship, it's more that the prices, the relative prices, change, not necessarily the total relationship of value of reserves to the currency. That might be hard to understand just the way I said it. So I'm going to skip the big, kind of the heavier math in this slide, but I'm just going to say what it means generally. What it means is that these are reversible formulas that are used in order to determine how much supply you will get if you convert reserves into supply. And that supply, when this conversion happens, is created. And you get it. And it will also determine how much reserves you get when a certain amount of supply is converted into reserves. And when that happens, the supply is burned and you get the reserves. And then at any moment, you can always look at the currency and get an instantaneous price by reserve over supply times the ratio. Okay. So basically, these are reversible formulas. And the point is that means that based on the reserve ratio, you have a certain ability for the price to react to market behavior. Over on the far right, it's 100%. The reserve ratio is 100%. So over on the far right, there's no change in price, no matter how much you convert to and from, because you're 100% backed. So if you get rid of all the currencies, there will be no more backing, and it won't matter. Like, it's just always pegged. On the far left, you're looking at it's probably like a 10%, 90% reserve ratio. So it's actually, it looks like a logarithmic price curve. The price, as you have any reasonable supply, really won't change that much, but it will slowly go up if people are converting to it and making more supply. And it will slowly go down if people are converting from it, but slowly. Like, it really won't, it's not incredibly reactive. the straight line, diagonal line, that's a 50% reserve ratio. And that is probably what most people kind of visualize when they think of a market reacting thing. You know, it probably would behave similarly to what most people think about, but really no markets that are out there really behave like exactly like any of these. This just allows these currencies to react to the market in a certain way. The price only changes by market forces, and the more of a reserve ratio you have, the less the price changes. Is basically what it is. And so that's, unless you have questions, which I would take. I don't really want to dwell on this because I don't know that it's easy for people to just kind of get by looking at it. But there's a lot of information there.
There is a lot of information.
And then this just kind of talks about why today's AMMs on Ethereum why do they need such large market caps to not get lots of slippage? You know, why do they like allow miners to front run transactions? And the bottom line is actually related to the way the programming model of the Ethereum VM. It's effectively that every single transaction that runs in a worldwide sense runs serially after the transaction that ran before it and before the transaction that runs after it. And what that means is that in DeFi, all of the all the conversions happen one at a time in a queue. So if you have a big conversion that is converting to, the price will go up. Then the next one comes along and the price is not the same as what it was when the first one went through. And now maybe it wants to buy, but the big one was before it. So it's going to get a much higher price and maybe it's a little buy. And so that wasn't really great for it, you know? And so every transaction is solved independently, serially, according to the VM. And even with something where they're just starting to think of maybe batching, like CowSwap is batching some swaps. And okay, so they only have two currencies. It's kind of like really simple, you know, one side and the other side. And so, but it's really considered a big deal because they're batching. But they're still taking the transaction one at a time at first, running it through the Ethereum VM, batching it up. Then they come back, they run it through again. And so it's the Ethereum model doesn't lend itself well to actually solving MEV, because the actual programming model, you could batch, you can work around it, you can do these different things, but the programming model itself kind of assumes serially processed transactions. And so what we do in Verus is actually quite different. We kind of take advantage of the UTXO model and actually solve all of the conversions for any single liquidity pool in all directions, all at once, in a single block. So if you've got a transaction that's a conversion in a block, and you've got another transaction that's a conversion in the block, and they're both doing, say, a buy to a currency or conversion to a currency, they will both get exactly the same price. So you can't front run because there is no front.
Yep. You can't have the miners choosing the ones, arranging the transactions to their own benefit.
Right. Because it doesn't matter how they arrange them, they're solved just the same way. And we do have some, you know, you could say, well, what if a miner sees a giant transaction that they want to front run, they want to buy before that transaction goes through? They could exclude it. They could just not put it in the block. And then they know they're going to make all this money, right? So they can put their little transaction in and get that money. Well, I'm sorry, but we kind of foil that too, because we're always trying to think of what can be done to make the protocol unfair, because we're doing our best to make sure that these are actually fair systems. And so, and by the way, there's a lot of money to be made by miners. Taking away their ability to, steal from users of the blockchain isn't really bad for miners, in the sense that there are lots of opportunities in this economy for them to make money that isn't in places where they might be able to get MEV. So the point is that we take all the transactions, we process them all together, and if a miner decides to exclude something so that they could front run it, we actually allow the final miner who runs the final transaction to reintroduce one transaction, one conversion. So they can basically, it could be the conversion that was excluded, and they might do it for fees. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So the original miner has no guarantee that their plan will work. And so they have really no incentive to take the risk to do that. But the final miner, this is actually really, really cool. And it's something that I've never heard of before we did it. The final, well, a few of these are, but the final miner who mines in the solution gets to add this one transaction. So they were not the miner. They don't get to be the miner. Well, it's not in the same block. And the chances that they're the same miner, the chance is very low. Okay. And they can't predict that they're going to be the same miner. But the miner who actually mines the solution into the block can add one more conversion. So now think of that. So they can disrupt previous miners trying to front run, but they also get the best and final arbitrage opportunity, because it's, so you got these all these conversions, they're all being solved at once, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can add one conversion. So with all of these solved conversions, if it means that the price for Ethereum or the price for Verus is much lower than it really should be at market in this liquidity pool, then the miner can buy as much of that as they want with their one transaction until they get it closer to the market price. And the interesting thing about that is they get to just make that money. They get the best ability to arbitrage by being able to do that, but they don't get to front run. They get to join. They get to join along with everybody else. And so they would never do that to throw the prices out of whack, because that would be bad for them.
Yep.
Anytime they throw the prices out of whack, it means they paid more or got less than they should have. But what they can do is every miner and staker now can help to crowdsource more liquidity so that the prices stay stable while they make money. So
pretty amazing.
That's kind of in a nutshell how that part works. And then the last part that I just wanted to mention in this community deck is privacy. So everybody talks about, privacy, and is this a privacy coin? As we've said from the beginning, we have absolute cutting edge technology for privacy, and our ZK snarks are as good as anyone else's ZK snarks for privacy. We do not require that everything on the chain is private. But what I've said from the beginning is that the real issue is it's the private pool. Whether it's on the same blockchain or not actually doesn't matter. It's the private pool. Now, we have a private pool, but it's not yet, competing with the size of Pirate or Zcash. But at the same time, we don't just use those technologies for our privacy. We have privacy technologies that no other project has, to my knowledge, actually. And so we are improving, and actually I think Zcash is doing something really interesting, which is this private by default. They're having this initiative where they're solving the client issue, which is really the only real issue, which is, clients can behave in a way on the blockchain that retains maximum privacy for the user. Okay. So what they're doing is they're saying, here are the things, here are the best practices, here's the way that on Zcash a client should behave. And they're going more to always send to a Z address. And they're making these, they don't have identity. We'd be happy to talk to them and help them get it, but they don't have an identity. So what they're doing instead of, of using an identity is, and I think what they're doing is interesting. They're making this composite or unified address, they're calling it. And it's kind of like a mixture of a Z address and an HD wallet for T addresses in a way. So they they're moving to that in the Halo arc, I guess is what they said. But the real point is that, so basically an ID has the capabilities of a unified address, and I think unified addresses might have an interesting, it might be interesting for us to support. I'm not sure yet, but definitely this concept of private by default. We have proof of stake. They don't. So their private by default doesn't take into account that you actually might want to take your funds at some point and stake them in the transparent pool, but still retain your privacy in the process. And so what we're going to do is, I think we're going to follow their model for private by default in our wallets, as long as we can talk to them and kind of figure out how to work together on that. We'll be happy to support them on that, so that it can improve the use of their system. And then we're going to basically take the private by default concept and adjust it slightly for how you would make the IDs private by default and how you would make these different things private by default, and just put in these kind of client tools so that people can get much more privacy in that sense. But now that I've said all that, that's all about ZK snarks and other people's core technology, because Zcash developed the original ZK snark technology that they're using for this privacy. And it's, we're using it and we're making the most of it, and pirates using it and making the most of it. And so that's a common technology between Verus and other projects as well. But what we have that's unique to Verus is we have in our strong identity technology strong proofs that allow people to prove things about themselves without disclosing other information. So generally you'll be able to go to a pub, prove your ID, and not have to disclose your name. Or people are really worried about being tracked with COVID status and everything else. You could actually have an ID, a self-sovereign ID, that could prove your COVID vaccination status, and you wouldn't even have to disclose your name. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Basically, the bottom line is that we're doing things with data privacy, and because we're kind of extending into the realm of really data and applications, and we've got the Verus data exchange format and other things that I didn't go into here. Our focus is really to go beyond just privacy in the money and in transactions, although we want to maintain and improve and constantly improve that, and we'll be looking at the Zcash shielded asset work and everything else. But right now, we already have privacy-based technologies that no one else has, because we care about not just convincing people that we have privacy, we care about the fundamentals of privacy. And so, as some people say, and I completely agree, if you don't have privacy, you don't have freedom. That's basically the truth. And so thank you for giving me a chance to go through that. I really appreciate it. And, if you have other things that you'd like to talk about or
well, absolutely. Plenty of other things to talk about, Michael. Lots and lots of other things to talk about, perhaps not in this video.
All right.
But I do appreciate you going through the whole, like a broad overview of Veruscoin. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Crypto Rich, I really appreciate, both the time. I mean, you were aware of us, and you came to discuss this with me before people knew anything about who we were. And you made it really clear at the beginning that you're not doing this for money, that we don't have to pay you, that it's because you're trying to understand, what are the right projects out there. And, through the 3 years that since we probably talked the first time, and that we've been working on this, and that we've made all of these advancements, you have, you've been around the community, you've kept up on things, you've asked to, talk about these things, and you've given us an opportunity to help get the word out so that people can learn about this before everything is, like all the vision is realized. I mean, we had Mainnet out, but you're helping people understand what this really is. And,
yes.
and I appreciate that. And as part of I appreciate that you have been, part of the Verus community throughout.
I am. Thank you, and I'm really, really grateful. I'm really, really grateful. From that first video in Pakistan at 45 degrees C in the shade. I remember that.
I do too.
In June 2018, right? No, I think it's a great project. And, you know, and I've said this to you, and I've said it on other videos and stuff. It boggles my mind what this does. I can't say that even now I understand all of it, but I get that there is magic in this blockchain, and that it empowers people. And I acknowledge its commitment for decentralization, its community-based ethos. And for everybody who's watching, you want to subscribe to my channel, because I will keep covering this project. Michael will keep coming back onto this channel. And Michael and I will keep filling our pockets with crypto profits. This is Crypto Rich and Crypto Michael signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.